Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Andrew Casto, and I'm here today with Matt Mitros as part of the University of Iowa Ceramics Virtual Visiting Artist Interview Series. Matt was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He has a BFA from Penn State, did a postbac at the University of Illinois, and also holds an MFA from the University of Washington. He's been an artist in residence at Aeromont, as well as the Archie Bray Foundation, and has taught ceramics and sculpture at the University of Washington, South Seattle Community College, Lakeside Upper School, Kennesaw State University, the University of Alabama, and is currently an assistant professor at Southern Illinois University. Matt's work has been featured in Art in America, Art Limited, Clay Times, Ceramics Monthly, and City Arts Magazine, and he has been exhibiting work throughout North America and Europe for the past 10 or 15 years, right, Matt? Maybe more?
Feels like 2 years, but
yeah. Thanks so much for joining us today, man.
It's a pleasure to be here.
This is our last episode of this series, so if viewers have stuck with us this whole time, we're appreciative. We hope we are bringing some interesting things to consider in your art making practice into this strange time during the middle or sort of in the midst of this pandemic during 2020. So Matt, I wonder if we could start by chatting just a little bit about how you began in ceramics.
Yeah, so I first learned to throw whenever I was 10, but I didn't take it very seriously until college. You know, my mother took clay classes at the clay studio in Philadelphia, and I would join her. And it was mostly hand building, and I did some art in high school, but I was a architectural engineering and philosophy major at Penn State. And I just happened to stumble upon a ceramics class, and I walk in to the ceramics studio, and I see this guy laying on a table, flat, with his face up, and he had a bowl on his head with a hole knocked out of it. And he was there for a while, and I thought, my God, why am I here? What's happening? And then I discovered that this is the professor, and that professor's name is Chris Staley. And when he came to, he pulled the bowl off his face, and he said, the Membres people of the American Southwest would bury their dead with a bowl like this with a hole punched in the middle of it so the spirit could leave. And I thought, my God, this is amazing. This has the potential to combine everything that I love about philosophy, which was sort of like introspective sort of examination of ideas and concepts, coupled with architectural engineering, which uses the material world to help communicate ways that we can enhance our living through structures or transferring hot and cold air throughout buildings. So there was this functional element, and I thought, wow, this is a moment where something is actually at the confluence of these two interests. And it was from that point on that I was hooked.
Yeah. I think so many people have like amazing Chris Daly stories, you know, and he has influenced so many people. And I've not studied with him, but I did live in his cabin in Montana for a while when I was at Archie Bray. So I interacted with him that way. And when he would send, like I would mail my rent checks to him, and he would send receipts back, and they would always have like a proverb on the receipt. It was amazing, you know, like best landlord ever. So it's just, that's an awesome story, and I can totally imagine that scene, you know.
It was kind of horrifying. It was a little intimidating, but it was also arousing, because to be honest, Andy, before that, I had sort of marginalized and sort of compartmentalized the crafts, and to a lesser extent, I suppose, the arts, as something you do to calm yourself after a day of hard work. And what I've learned over the last 20 years is that, yes, it does that, but also the crafts is the work as well. It's like, so, you know, it has this calming, also informative, and it has this ability to be someone's vocation. And so my lensing of the arts was so narrow before that class. And so that's part of what I think is the beautiful thing about art school, is that you not only learn how to make things, but you understand why making things matters, and how that making process can inform your ability to be a better person. So it's this sort of like this broad, all-encompassing opportunity to become a better person by being an art student. And I love that component.
Yeah, and I think that's right on. Like, and no other discipline that I can think of asks that of you as a student, especially. right?
Right.
Like you're not in a math class talking about how to be a better person. You're talking about math. And art is like both of these things. Like we talk about how to make better work, and that work intrinsically has to speak from the deepest parts of ourselves in the most vulnerable way possible for it to be good. And that's like, it's high risk, it's real, it's intense. And as a result, the output is equally amazing, I think.
Well, and yeah, because I mean, whenever I was recruiting students at different schools, and even at this current one, if I had to speak to the parent of a high school student that's looking to do their undergrad, or if I speak to an undergrad who's looking to go to grad school, what these degrees in art really give you is an opportunity to lens the world in a way that is highly critical and also highly sincere. We're forced to not only be honest, but to be cynics at the same time and to challenge conventions. And so when you take that template, that lensing of the world, that ability to sort of objectively examine things, but then also subjectively think, how does this apply to me and who I am? You take that template and you can apply it to almost any profession. So
Yeah.
really an art degree is kind of at the foundation of every sort of successful person's goals in life, is
Yeah.
to be sort of sincere and to look at the world fairly.
Yeah.
So it's bigger than being a maker. It's about
Yeah.
being sort of a human.
Yeah, I could not agree more. That's really wonderfully said. How, when you started and when those questions were sort of occurring to you for the first time, did you think of yourself then, like in those early times, as being driven towards like, or maybe more pulled towards one side of or particular styles of making or others, or like, I
Yeah.
mean, your body of work over the years has changed a lot since I've known of you,
Right.
and I sort of wonder, like in the beginning, what kinds of things were you making?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I thought I was going to be, barefoot and have a broken down truck in North Carolina, and I'd be growing vegetables, and I'd have a pottery barn, and there would be no checks; it would just be cash, and it was sort of this utopian idea of sort of the cliche Americana potter. And I quickly realized that that's not actually who I am. Whenever we would have potlucks at Penn State, I would bring my food, my offerings in Tupperware. I didn't bring it in the pots I was making. So I was pontificating a sort of quality of life or a way of living, which was much more image oriented and had less to do with sincerity. And as I began the process of discovering who I am sincerely, I realized that maybe the proletariat people potter, even though I think that's an important endeavor and I have a special place in my heart for those makers, that's not me. It wasn't the best fit. And so I began to transition away from pottery to sculptural elements. And, I was in a really bad car accident. I was paralyzed and I had to teach myself how to walk again. And that was during art school. And so when you
Whoa.
begin to analyze your life in a different way and you begin to think of, well, maybe there's a story here I can tell, that pottery is not the best platform. It's not the best conduit, the best way to deliver the concepts. I could have strangled it to death and said, no, I will make pottery that's about this narrative of sort of reconstruction. But I realized relatively quickly that this has afforded me an opportunity to let the work shift in a way where I was finding the best platform. I mean, I love throwing. I love making things. There's something sort of nourishing about the idea of someone using one of my pieces, but I didn't have that emotional connection the way some of the potters, behind me do.
Yeah.
And I felt like I wasn't really contributing to the continuum of ceramics, and I certainly wasn't being honest with myself. And
Yeah.
and that's a hard thing to sort of justify and to accept in oneself. But I had a cathartic moment through that sort of trauma, that, lying in a hospital, not being able to walk, you have a lot of time to think. And
Right.
so, I did some serious thinking, and I sort of emerged from that with a different set of values and certainly motivation.
Yeah. That's, I mean, I aside from the car accident part of that story, I really, really feel very similarly in terms of the
Yeah.
trajectory that I had also. So I can totally relate to the question of being honest with oneself about the making process. I mean, I think like a lot of what we see as young people when we're learning in the studio is someone that we desire to emulate or someone that we are influenced by. And for me, my teacher was equally charismatic and really excited about pots and made them real in a way that was super meaningful to me. It took me years to sort of accept that maybe that wasn't the path that was best for me, you know?
It's hard because whenever we're young, Andy, we get seduced by these powerful, super intelligent people, these mentors, and the best mentor is the one that understands the difference between a student and a disciple. And I think, often there's a problem in academia where professors are interested in creating disciples, right? And I was fortunate in that my relationship with Chris Staley, Liz Quackenbush, Doug Jack, Akio Takamori, Jamie Walker, it was more of a true student mentorship dynamic
Yeah.
rather than me being forced to model my activity in the shadow of them or to be an echo of them. So I feel very fortunate in that way. And it's because of them I was able to actually say, I'm not sure who I am, but I know who I'm not. And I
Yeah.
wasn't a potter.
Yeah.
And that's all that I had to go by. I just knew what I was not.
Yeah. What an incredible list of people to study with. Really.
I feel really lucky.
Yeah, that's like a dream team. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so maybe the next thing to talk about is like the current process that you're invested in terms of,
Yeah.
I mean, you're like the mugshot Monday guy on Instagram, and like I always see it and I'm always excited to scope it out. So it's funny that we're having this conversation about not being potters.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, it's funny. The Mugshot Monday thing. So first of all, I didn't really understand Instagram till about 3 or 4 years ago. I had
Yeah.
some grads help me set it up. And once I started to, I thought Instagram was just for, taking really nice pictures of oneself in a bikini on a boat. I didn't know it actually meant more than that. And it's actually this incredible platform for makers.
Yeah.
And I like the immediacy of it, and I like how informal it is. And so when I follow up on immediacy, informality, I started to think about, well, what can I do to create a weekly cadence, a rhythm, almost a ritual where I
Yeah.
could make? And so I sort of stumbled across this concept of the Mugshot Monday. It's sort of a silly little Potter thing, but it actually became very meaningful because it gave me that rhythm, that
Yeah.
weekly rhythm. And I went 2 years where I just said, I'm not going to let a week pass without posting something that I've created or a reference to a show that I'm in. And it was really sort of important for me, transformative in that I was sort of project based before that. And I realized, no, I actually kind of, at this point in my life, I need to constantly be making. And so the Mugshot Monday gave me this platform to crank out work. And the mugs, I know, full disclosure, I know the mugs are sculptures. I call them mugs because it gives me parameters to work within. So I can work, if I just say, I want to make small sculptures, it's like huge. But if I say, okay, I want to give myself some self-imposed limitations, because whenever we think of the sort of iconographic sort of symbols that we use or the agents that we use to define a mug, we have vessel, we have a handle, and possibly there's a saucer, but there's some very simple sort of hallmark elements. And so I said, okay, I'm going to function within these limitations. And at first I thought it was just going to be a maybe month-long exercise. And it turned into this 2-year sort of experience of thinking, what can I do to approximate the energy of a mug and proportions and the vessel, the plinth, and then the handle. And so, and I have some over here that I can grab. And it, I know they're sculptures. But for me, it was helpful as a maker to give myself these arbitrary limitations. And it also was a way for me to celebrate ceramics. I mean, on any given Monday, the past few years, if I would post something, I would say it's very fair to say that no more than 60% of any given object is actually ceramic. There were a lot of other materials, but everything that I used, every element, plexiglass, fur, whatever it is, they weren't just, I didn't just grab them from thin air. It's because I was trying to approximate a sensibility of something that I love in ceramics. So in ceramics, we get a crystalline glaze or something that's shimmering. I just thought, well, I want to synthesize that. I want to capture the energy that I register from that experience or that memory I have of a certain glaze or a form, but I want to do it in a material that has nothing to do with ceramics. And And so I began to touch the world with a ceramic sensibility, using my ceramic hands, but not using clay as a material, using fur, astroturf, all these other things. So I felt, and I still do believe they to be, pieces of ceramic art, because for me, ceramics is an action. Clay is the noun, and ceramics is a way of thinking, a way of touching the world. And
Mm.
so this was an expose or an exercise in approximation, in synthesis, in
Yeah.
translation, within the narrow confines of the subject of a mug. And
Yeah.
that's really where I'm at today. And, I have some projects coming up where I'm going to now synthesize the synthesis, and I'm going to begin to make these a little larger. And there's not going to be a direct reference to the mug, but the reference, Andy, was an intentional limitation I gave myself as an exercise that probably went on far too long, but it was fun for it to happen. And it established a new working rhythm for me
Yeah.
that's kind of critical.
Yeah, no, I love these things. I mean, I think they're really wonderful. And I also, I mean, I appreciate a couple of different things about this. One is the regular act of the posting. Like if for no other reason than just as like a device to keep you going, like I think we
Yeah,
all need those things as artists, because like even though being in the studio is like probably my favorite thing in the world to do, there are some days when it's like impossibly hard to
right,
get there. And
right.
regular schedules, deadlines, no matter how much I get annoyed by them sometimes, are the things that keep me coming back.
Sure.
So the sort of discipline to get that done every week is like commendable and exciting. And then also I think we often, as ceramic artists, less now than maybe it used to be, are faced with this question of like, why ceramics? Why clay? Why do
Yeah,
you? And I used to hate that, because I'd be like, what? Like, I don't ask anybody else like why medicine, or
yeah.
why landscaping, or I don't know, whatever. Like it's what I do. It's the thing that I know. It's my life. And so to make a thing within the constructs of that idea is, I think, valuable in the sense that like what you said, we need parameters. Like our parameters happen to be ceramics. That project's parameters happens to be a mug. Like,
Right.
great, like, and like what you said, like if someone asked me like just to make a project and I didn't have the sort of boundaries of ceramics to work with, that feels incredibly difficult to me, because then anything under the sun is usable, and I'm not sure that that's like healthy for me as a person, like
Well, and that's exactly what I agree with you. And that's exactly what I think is critical, is to understand what works for oneself as an individual. Like what,
yeah,
and I think it's very easy to adopt, or let's use the word appropriate, someone else's sort of sensibility or handling of material, and then that becomes their practice. And I question the sincerity of that. And in fact, I would say it's counterfeit, because it's an approximation of something that's already been established. And, some potters really push back, and there's a little bit of disdain, or just, a lot of people are uncomfortable with me calling these pots, because they
huh,
possibly recognize that there's an element there where I'm being fatuous, or that it's tongue in cheek, or that I'm mocking his ceramics and the history of ceramics. What it actually is, and I want to make a declaration right now, is a total admiration and respect for the
yeah,
field, for the makers. And I just believe, and I believe this with everything in life, there's room at the table for everyone. We just have to sort of maybe find a spot for them, give them a place setting, and there's conversation. Everyone brings a conversation to the table. And it's not like some people are a threat to other people's practice. I don't buy into any of that. I welcome conversation, and there's some very traditional pot. I mean, one of my favorite mugs is a Ruggles and Rankin mug that I bought, I think, in 1999. And it's just this fabulous form. I would never make it. I wouldn't even understand how to make it, but I can appreciate it. And
yeah,
so
of course.
I hope the viewing public knows that I don't mock ceramics. I actually celebrate it through
Yeah,
this act.
I've never seen it as anything but celebratory myself. I
Thank you.
looked at those things and thought the same thing. Like, there are all these materials existing within this construct that happens to come from ceramics, and as a
Right.
way of talking about ceramics.
Sure.
So, yeah,
Sure. Absolutely.
I want to know, like, I've always wondered this about you. Like, what is it like in the studio? Like, okay, are there bins of parts? Are there, and then you walk in and you're like, little this, little that, little this, or is there a drawing and a plan? Like, how does it happen?
So I don't go to buffets as much as I did whenever I was much younger. But if you imagine, my studio is like the Golden Corral. There's just tables of things everywhere, and there is a taxonomy. There's a little bit of organization to it, but it's an unusual system. But I can decipher it, and so I walk in and I essentially just grab things. And I used to use museum wax, and I would sort of compose, and then if I felt the composition was making sense, I would then separate the elements, work on them, and then join it back together. But the way I work now, it is still the Golden Corral. It's a little bit of a buffet, but
Yeah.
I'll go into part making mode where I'll just make thousands of little things. Or if I'm tiling my bathroom and I have all these chunks of tile, I'll ball mill them overnight, and then they go into a little mayonnaise container. And I have all these different little containers, and I don't draw. I haven't drawn a picture in probably 15 or 20 years. But I'm fortunate. I can draw in my head and I can recall the images. And so whenever I drive to Montana or I go somewhere really far, it's, 30 some hours, no cruise control, no radio. I don't have my son talking to me, telling me that whale sharks swim a certain way. There's no distractions. And I just drive and I draw in my head. And
Yeah.
it's a way to recharge. And I think the act of drawing is critical for an artist. It's just each artist needs to ask yourself, will the drawing of the idea help you as a maker? And that's a distinction. That's an important thing. And I've just realized with me as a maker, the moment I draw something, it becomes, it's brought to fruition in a way that denies me the ability to expand, and it becomes less elastic, the idea. I can't manipulate it. And I think it's probably a weird rigidness in my mind. When I see it drawn, it kind of becomes fixed. So for me, I need it to be more of an emotional feeling. And I have a lot of issues with people that work intuitively. I think people that work intuitively, it's often an excuse for not thinking, because intuition is kind of like a cop out. There has to be accountability. And so I try to substantiate my intuitive motions with a tremendous amount of introspection and thinking. I think things through far more than people probably were willing to admit. And I spend a lot of time essentially, Andy, just composing, arranging, grabbing parts. I have 8 or 9 cups going at any given time.
Uh-huh.
And I'll cross pollinate sometimes, but usually I'll sort of like, I'll go like this and say, okay, these parts go with this one, these parts go here. And I begin to construct and I play. I have a lot of titanium holding my back and head together. So when I think of these things that I make, they come from parts, disjointed elements. A lot of times things are broken. I don't even file claims anymore with UPS or FedEx when they break things. In fact, I send them thank you notes, because when the pieces come back broken, I rework them. And it's, in a way, I try to not let my personal story surface too much in the work, but I do use it as nourishing fuel as a maker.
Yeah.
I don't want the fact that I, was paralyzed and I had to teach myself how to walk. I don't want that to be the art, but I do want that to be the thing that happens behind the scenes as the maker. That's the thing that's informing me. But I'm not comfortable with that being the subject. That's not who I am, and that's not what I want my story to be. But that's where this comes from. And so when I am in my studio, I'll see these broken parts and I'll begin to put them together. And I think in some way it's me trying to pump life back into things that are dead.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, I feel like when I see those things, there is this like consistent sensibility about the materials that go through them and how they're constructed as compositions. And to me, like, that's the fun of looking at them. Like, a lot of times I'm seeing those things and I'm like, what does he have on that one? Like, and then I think like, all right, did he bend that plexiglass, or like, did he scrounge some way that was already like, I mean, the stories of those objects to me becomes really fascinating, because there's all these little like elements that are homogenized and working together to create a cohesive whole. And like, it's not unlike what we do as people, right? Like,
No, yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, I have a dark story which is informing my practice as a maker. But what's funny is I don't go into that woe is me, no one knows my pain, nihilist thing that I used to do as an art student. I spend a lot of time in my studio laughing
Yeah.
because I get a kick out of seeing these silly compositions form. And for me, laughter is a good way to sort of accent the pain in the narrative. And so for me, they dovetail well together. I do a lot of laughing in my studio because I look at these things and I just think this is just silly and outrageous. And Memphis design, the Memphis group, huge influence in what I do.
Yeah.
They're getting a major revival right now. It seems like every art student wants to reference the Memphis sort of design era of the early 80s. But I do draw quite a bit from that movement. Certain elements of Roxy Payne, particularly the automated paintings, the sort of mechanized sort of urethane paintings that he did.
Yeah.
And some really early work of Richard Serra when he was taking the liquid lead and throwing it in the corner. That
Yeah.
sort of activity of preserving architecture through a liquid material that then cools and becomes solid. These, these elements of transformation are sort of really at the heart of where I am as a maker. And those are the works I respond to.
What about sneakers?
Sneakers.
Well, when I look at the bottoms of these things, I
Yes.
see I see the soles of sneakers sometimes, like certain, and I'm kind of a person who likes this world myself, so I may be like bringing a little bit of my own interest to your work as I'm thinking about it. But like in particular, there was a mug recently that I saw that I think Patty Chalmers posted that was like I think it was a Campbell Soup mug commercial with like a bottom stuck on it, and the bottom really felt like the sole of a Nike shoe in terms of the way it was treated with these sort of chunks sort of stuck in this, what I assume was maybe PC11 or something.
Yeah, so yeah, those are bathroom tiles that I ball mill and
Uh-huh.
use. And it's funny you bring up sneakers. I got very excited whenever you said that. People that know me well know that I'm absolutely obsessed with shoes.
Yeah.
And in particular, a certain type of Cole Haan. I've had 24 pairs of them since 2004. And I take a picture of each pair whenever I'm about to throw them out because I want to do a coffee table book of all my shoes. And it's just the exact same shoe, sometimes brown, sometimes black. But yeah, I think shoe design is the most exciting thing in the world because it's totally responsive to the moment. It's just when you look at footwear, I can't think of an article of clothing other than possibly haircuts that are that register a period in time, that talk about an era.
Yeah.
Shoes, haircuts, possibly jeans, but shoes are just fabulous. And there's so much information that goes into a sneaker versus a pump. Like whatever it is that you wear, it's like this big, full of information. I mean, shoes are like Ron Nagel. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's just like, Peter Volkus is like a wedding dress. It's just, I think of it in those terms.
Yeah, and it's like, to me, I mean, I look at them too, and it's like they're a composition that has a sole and and like an upper, and then like there's all the top has like fabric around it in very specific ways, and it's like the way I think about three-dimensional objects, like
Oh,
spaced out and sectioned off. And it's also on my mind because I'm like heavy into this Bulls documentary that's playing right now on ESPN, the Last Dance. And
I'm obsessed with it.
yeah, awesome. So like I'm seeing, like simultaneously these games that I remember as like a 12-year-old, and then the shoes are there, and I'm like, oh, and I, like at the same time, I think I was looking at that post, and I was like, that's just like the Jordan 3 sole.
You'd be
So
surprised how many people message me and talk about shoe soles, right? People send me a picture of their shoe, and I just think, my God, that's beautiful. You get
yeah,
it.
yeah, totally. Well, that's really cool that that's of an interest to you also.
For sure.
Um, yeah, and so like, gosh, I guess I've covered the beginning of your career kind of question, and also some about process. It's interesting to hear the backstory too about like the accident and how these things sort of might speak a little bit about your own story as well. I didn't know anything about that.
Right.
So yeah, I can't imagine what that would be like to sort of work through. Um,
You know, when I was at the University of Washington, my first critique there, I love anecdotal stories, so I'm gonna take you on one right
yeah,
now. So,
please.
you know, it's a figurative school, at least it was. This was 2004, my first quarter there.
It was like the
I
figurative
applied
school.
with, what's that?
It was like the figurative school then.
Yeah, yeah, and
That's what I knew of it.
I was doing figurative work, and I thought I was a figurative person, but it was during that experience that I realized you could talk about the figure without having any figurative elements.
Hmm.
And it took me making some bad figures and some really, really brutal conversations during critiques to realize who I am as a maker. And I remember Jamie Walker at one critique, he said, how do you feel about the fact that your personal narrative is so much better than any of the art you've made since you've been here? And it was like devastating. My world came crashing down. But
Yeah.
I realized, you know, the seminal, impactful moments in one's life, they don't have to be regurgitated and synthesized in a way where you're trying to replicate it. You can synthesize it and filter out a lot of the maybe things that'll be distracting for the viewer. And it's almost like a distillation process. And so if you distill your experiences to the core essence, the emotions, that feeling of waking up out of a coma with tubes coming out of every hole of your body, realizing you can't move, how do you make that without making a figure with tubes in your nose? You know,
Right.
there's a way to do these things. And I think that's the burden of the artist. And that's also one of the most challenging things as a student going into art school, when you feel like you've got this important story to tell and they tell you, you're telling it in a way that's killing the story.
Yeah.
It forces you to rethink things. And so, you know, it was hard, that moment in grad school. And that first critique was brutal. I mean, they were all using words this big at the same time, and I blacked out. I have no clue what was said after a certain point, but it it was transformative once I had time to reflect, and I realized, you know, I'm going about this story the exact opposite way. I need to look at it from the inside out instead of the outside in.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's a great way to say it, and great advice also for other people to hear. I mean, you know, when you're in those moments, it's so hard to find your way out of them. As
Yeah,
an art student, it's like you think like, oh, just someone please just tell me what I'm supposed to do, and I'll do it.
exactly.
But problem is, no one can tell you. Like
Wow.
you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
um, so, what about something in your collection or in your orbit there that
Yeah.
you could show us that we've talked about, maybe that's meaningful or
Yeah,
informative?
you know, so I have all these wonderful cups here.
Really do have a ton of awesome ones.
This nasty little thing here, where it's kind of like a saucer built into the cup, it was made by Ron Kovach,
Uh-huh.
and he actually wrote RNK. I don't know what his, or no, RONK. He wrote
Nice.
his name across the side of it. And I just think, this piece, how dare you exist in the world? It's like the most obnoxious thing in the world. And when I look at that, it gives me hope. It lets me think about things in a different way. So as a maker, he made the cup already connected to the saucer, put the handle on while it was still on the wheel, and then had the audacity to write his name on the side. And
Yeah.
I say this with so much love and respect for Ron, because he was a very transformative person in my life. But that's an important piece. And then this piece here, I pulled this off my wall. It's a photo Tim Rhoda did. I don't know if you're familiar with his work,
No.
um, but he used to show with Greg Kucera in Seattle, and he's now in New York City, and he's shown all over the world. He went to UW, but these are chickens
Oh wow.
made out of clay that are hanging there. And so he was a ceramics grad at the University of Washington. And I don't know if you can see, he put screws right through the photograph to
Yeah.
anchor the wood. So there's this like physicality to this. I can touch the photograph, and I probably shouldn't. There's drywall screws going through it. And it's a liberating piece. It gives me hope that these sort of definitions that we use when we talk about art, we can subscribe to them or we can use them as opportunities to bounce around and
Yeah.
rebel. And rebellion, I think, has an important place. I think sometimes it's done for the sake of the rebellion rather than actually a dialogue about what isn't working in one's world. In this case, this piece is just so wonderful. It's just like found plywood, and it's like awful in every way that makes it wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted to share this with you right now because this is an important piece, and
Yeah.
I love this piece.
Yeah. Wonderful. So those are both like awesome examples of things that sort of speak to your time as a maker, and also like have similarities with what you do as well. I think in a lot of ways, maybe not directly visible, but
Yeah, absolutely. And I know before we went on video, we talked a little bit about this, and I kind of want to circle back around. I do think there is a historic argument that scholars will demonstrate. Makers of our generation, Andy, we were impacted by 9/11 and seeing things fall apart, having this sort of paradigm shift with how we sort of look at the world, how we think about things. I mean, before 9/11, I went hitchhiking through Turkey, and so, but it's like now, one would think twice before doing something like that. And so our world as makers changed. I was 23 when those towers came down. I remember watching that and not really understanding what's going on. But I think that element of deconstruction is part of my DNA as a maker. It
yeah,
impacted me in
yeah,
some way.
yeah, same. I think that like that's the thing that I mean, the thing that led us to that conversation was thinking about what this present pandemic does post art world afterwards. What makers sort of have as a result of this in their DNA to bring to the table making work. You and I must be about the same age because I think I was also 23, maybe 24 when 9/11 happened.
Yeah. Let me think. I would have been, 23. And I remember I was at Penn State, turned, walked downstairs to a coffee shop and saw the news, and just didn't know what to make of it all because, we in the West, we live a pretty good life. I mean, it's safe, and so suddenly to realize that, the world is just different than we thought it was. And it hit me at a good time in my life too, because I
Yeah,
was just beginning to transition from the comforts of sort of childhood to adulthood. Early 20s are a transitional period. And it definitely imposed some values on my templating of the world, my lensing of the world in a way that probably would have happened at some point, but it accelerated things.
yeah,
And that acceleration, I think, is good. I like to think a lot, and I spend a lot of time talking to myself. And I don't read as much as I used to, but I used to read nonstop. And it's critical to examine. I think if you sort of live life without examining things, there's a great consequence to that.
yeah,
And I think it's intolerance. It's a number of different things. And I think when you begin to think about the world around you, you begin to love it more. You begin to process it, and you begin to welcome other conversations. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about art school. And that's also one of the unfortunate things about this pandemic, is that we have all these MFAs that are graduating. We have these second year grads, these first year grads that suddenly had this energy like pulled out from under them. And it's like, what do you do now that you can't work with clay? I just had a Zoom meeting about an hour or two ago, and we talked about this. And it's just, I'm sure you're dealing with this on a daily basis too.
yes.
So, there's different things going on as instructors. How do we now function in this new normal? As students, how do they function? It's challenging.
Yeah. 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 And I think no matter what, like everybody is affected. It's bizarre to like, I've done, like I said, 9 of these interviews. One was with someone in Sweden. I did one yesterday with someone in Paris.
Yeah.
It's the same conversation, and like so few things in life would have been happening across the board to everybody where I could like dial up on Zoom, someone,
Yeah.
you know, 5,000 miles away and be like, what's the pandemic like for you right now? And
What,
it's the
well,
same.
And I think that is because I try to be an optimist whenever possible. I try to use that as my default way of looking at things. And it's hard at times, but this is one of those positive outcomes. We now
Mhm.
are conversant and our literacy with Zoom has exponentially enhanced. And so this now has created a totally different format by which we can introduce new artists, new ideas, new conversations to students and to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I do think one negative consequence of this is that there is going to be some creative Darwinism that goes on during this time because those that are dependent on sort of the architectural confines of facility, those that need kilns, that need different things to make
Yeah.
their work, they're the ones that maybe are going to realize how tethered they are and how vulnerable they are as makers. And those that can start to use Play-Doh or use other materials and just melting straws together, those people, I think, should be very, very happy with their ability to be resilient and to rebound and to continue making
Yeah.
and sort of celebrate the fact that they're not confined to a ceramic studio. The
Yeah.
ceramic studio will return, but what do you do now when you can't get in there? Those are tough questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it is those constructs that wind up providing you with the space to have a new idea. I mean, it's
Sure.
like in the beginning, you wouldn't sort of wish it upon yourself, of course, you know, and whether it's worth it or not, you know, I don't
Right.
know. But like, if we're in the business of like seeing the lemonade from the lemons or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
like I think that there are ways that I can like look back on my life and say, oh, like that batch of crappy casting slip I made led to a whole body of work. And at the
Totally.
time, I was pissed because I spent a whole day on this casting slip. Well, totally worth it in the end. Um, so I don't know what comes out of this, but I guess I hope that there are some fruits of sort of the creative thinking that goes into dealing with the sort of problems of this time that wind up becoming like good jumping off points for new work and new ideas. So
I'm hopeful. I
yeah,
really am hopeful that that's what's going to happen.
yeah,
And I encourage anyone out there who's suffering, who feels like they can't do their thing. We get it. We
yeah,
know it.
yeah,
Try something different. Just if anything, to prove what you already know about yourself. But maybe there'll be a discovery that happens from that.
yeah. Totally, I agree. Um, well, I think it's probably a good point to conclude on here, Matt. I really appreciate your time today and your insights. It's been awesome to talk with you in this way, and thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, Andy. This was a real pleasure.